It's time we set the record straight on a massive misconception that many people have about Israel. I actually posted about this on our JTV social media just now. We put a post that says, Israel is not a rectification for the Holocaust. Israel is a rectification for 2,000 years of Jewish exile. This is so important. There are so many people that have this sense, because they haven't really studied it so much, that Israel simply exists basically as like a guilt offering from parts of the world who felt sorry for the Jews. And it's like, well, there are these Palestinians here and they kind of have to suck it up, I guess, because they're going to have to lose their land and territory and all that because we feel bad for the Jews. That is not true. This is a falsehood. On a very surface level, by the way, before I go into the depth of this point, even if you don't want to go back thousands of years, Dr. Inat Wolf points out that actually, if you look at... Well, in fact, you know what? I'm just going to show you what she says. Because she says that actually, in some ways, the Holocaust made the state of Israel less likely. Have you ever thought of that before? Why? Because there were so fewer Jews left around. And so that's point number one. And point number two is that if you look at it, actually, the Zionist cause began far earlier than the time of, the rise of Nazi Germany. And why would that be the case if your narrative is that it was just because we felt bad about the Holocaust? So let's have a look at what Inat Wolf said.
Say Free Palestine of German guilt, they are actually promoting two falsehoods. One, that Israel exists because of some German or European guilt due to the Holocaust. In fact, because of the Holocaust, there was a danger that the Jewish state will not even come into being because there were no more Jews. It took European nations at least a generation, and sometimes not even that, to feel guilty. But it was actually in many ways despite of the Holocaust that the Jewish state was established. The second falsehood is that the Palestinians are the victims of the establishment of the state of Israel. The Palestinian Arabs are unfortunately only victims of their own obsession with the non-existence of a Jewish state. They went to war in order to prevent the Jewish state from being established. It was an unnecessary war. Had they not gone to war, there would have been an Arab state next to a Jewish state. No one would have been displaced.
Exactly. These are such important points. But I want to get back to now the main point of what I was talking about, which is the second part of this graphic that you see here. Israel is a rectification for 2,000 years of Jewish exile. The Zionist movement, the movement for the re-establishment of Jewish sovereignty in the Holy Land, did not begin, with Theodor Herzl. It began 4,000 years ago, when our forefather Abraham was communicated with God himself, who told him that he is assigning this land to be a land for his descendants, where Abraham's mission, he ignited this chosen mission to create a nation of God, a godly nation that become God's voice, his mystery to the world, to share his Torah and his vision for how the kind of world that God wishes to dwell in. This would be their base, the land of Israel, where they would do that from. And he has to assign one land, unlike other nations. He has to assign a piece of land to the Jewish people because a godly nation only has a right to exist on earth by really divine right. Because you would think a godly nation should be in heaven, earthly nation should be on earth. And that's partly what explains the pushback against the Jewish people. It's a pushback against godliness, against wanting the spiritual to permeate the physical. And so that's why God had to, by divine decree, say, no, the Jewish people are going to have this land assigned to them. But this is so important. This is where Israel's the justice of her cause begins. Not by any international legal agreement, though there are many to justify Israel's cause. Not even by our historical connection that, by the way, far outdates the Arab who live there, which, you know, you've had a rise in the Arab population quite significantly, actually in the 1800s, when the Jews started to return there en masse as well. But also even prior to that, through conquest and the Islamic conquest of the 7th century. But the Jews were there prior to Islam, and they were there many centuries prior. And they were there because this was the land that God himself assigned to the Jewish people. So let's be clear. There is a deep historical, biblical, and theological connection the Jewish people have to this land, and they've been praying since being displaced from this land, from their prior sovereignty, the only state or sovereign entity that had its own distinct identity in this land prior to the state of Israel was a Jewish state. Other than that, it's amazing, but there was no other sovereign state there. It was just controlled by different empires. Remarkable thing. And that's actually because the land simply cannot be acquired, because it is an eternal inheritance by divine decree of the Jewish people. And so there's not going to be another state there, another sovereign state there. And so this is critical, absolutely critical to understanding the conflict and to understanding Israel's right to be there. It goes back centuries. And as I say, Jews were forcibly displaced. Some always stayed there, and there was always a Jewish presence there, but most were in exile. They prayed every day, every single day, when they were after food and blessing God and saying grace. They mentioned the desire to return to the land and to rebuild Jerusalem in their prayers, and the standing prayer and the Amidah 3 times a day. At their Passover Seder tables, where they would say Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. This is a many, many thousand-year-old story, a 4,000-year-old story. And so this nonsense that Israel exists simply because of the Holocaust and otherwise there's no deeper connection the Jews have to this land is absurd. And it's a very, very dangerous lie, because it feeds into this narrative that the Jews don't really belong there. Let's be clear. If there was ever such a people who belonged in a certain area or territory or piece of land, it is the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.